Okay, good evening, everybody. And my name's Tracy. I'll be moderating tonight's meeting. I recognize most of the people here. This is the Water Board's 14th community meeting. 14, that's a lot. 14th community meeting on the Ford Aeronutronics site. We're here tonight just to update you overall on what's going on. Really grateful that you chose to spend a couple hours or an hour with us tonight. Thank you for coming. Just some logistics. Food over in the corner, restrooms out the door and over to the left. We are live streaming this tonight so that people that do not want to come in person can watch electronically. So during the public comment period, we're going to follow the same protocol we always follow, which is have you write your names and your name or comment on the comment card that you were given, and we will read them out. And we're only doing that to make sure that people that are participating electronically can hear the questions and it's a fruitful meeting for them as well. Okay, I think, John, you can change to the next slide. Or am I doing that? I'm doing it. Oh, I think I can change to the next slide. Imagine that. Okay, so this is our agenda tonight. We have a short presentation, and we'll go through that, and then we'll take questions. When you came in, I hope you signed in. You should have gotten these handouts. Along with that were the comment cards and pens, so we'd like to ask you to write your questions again. If you really feel that you want to speak and have everybody hear you speaking, I'm happy to bring one of the microphones over to you, and you can do that. But first, we're going to take the comment cards, and then we'll take any live stream questions, and then we'll take anybody that wants to speak out loud in front of folks. I would like to introduce who we have up here tonight. I think everybody knows Jessica Law. She's been managing this project for the past eight years, I think. Yeah, a long time. We've been here a long time. And then this is Amanda Palumbo. She's a toxicologist. And then this is Mike Barnes. Mike is the program manager for WSP, which is Ford's environmental consultant. And then just over here, we have some other WSP employees, but I do want to call attention to Ken Connor, who runs the Western operations for WSP. And he's attended every one of these meetings, an important project to WSP. I think, let me just see. Raise your hand. Okay, last, if you have any property-specific questions tonight, same thing that we always do. Michelle over here can meet you at this table, and she can go through any property-specific questions you have about where you live. We're not going to discuss those in a public forum. And finally, all of us will remain after the meeting to look at these maps, answer any questions you may have, or just to say hi, okay? So with that, I'm going to hand this over to Jessica. Now that I know how to do it, look at that. Yeah, I think that was what I wanted to.
All right, so we can hear me? Yes. Make sure in the back? Awesome. Yeah, so if you guys have clarifying questions, raise your hand. I may repeat it so that way we don't either run the microphone out to you or I'll just repeat it. But the presentation outline is gonna look the same as past. The first probably 6 or so slides are gonna be the same. I think everyone has been here before and has heard this. So I'm going to blaze through these first slides. If there's a point that you want me to settle on and explain something more, I can do that, but we've gone into depths in past meetings that are all recorded, so you can also look there, but I'm happy to go into details if you need it, maybe during Q&A. But for the interest of this meeting, I want to get into the weeds tonight. We've been collecting data for a long time. We've had remediation system operating for a year, so there's a lot of good information to talk about. It is very technical, so I'm gonna slow things down and just really explain things. So, move the mic closer. Okay, so is that better? Yes. Awesome. Okay, so then we'll be doing that. And then we'll jump into the Q&A. And like Tracy said, we'll have time afterwards. But when I'm getting into some graphs, figures, if there's anything you have clarifying questions on, stop me. I know in the past we've kind of said, hold your questions to the end, but I don't want to, if I did a bad job explaining something, let me know. Let me try to re-explain it in another way to help everyone just understand what the points I'm trying to, get across. So, without further ado, we've all seen this figure. The green outline is the 200 acres that Ford leased. The blue outlined area, and I'm gonna get the laser pointer going. This blue outlined area, that's the former facility, operated from 57 to 93. Soil closure allowed the property to be rezoned from industrial use to residential, was redeveloped. But the site was then transferred to the Santa Ana Water Board for the groundwater assessment and remediation oversight. So we have seen this recap of all the work that's happened since the mid to late 90s to current. But what I want to hone in on is it was that 2017 request that we made to Ford to prepare a conceptual site model update that took all of the site history, site data that's been collected, reevaluated it under current standards, screening levels, and industry standards, and that's what identified. It identified a couple data gaps, but one of them was that vapor intrusion evaluation, the need to reevaluate that. So that's when, that's what triggered this. And in 2018, we started that vapor intrusion investigation activities in all the different communities. I have this slide for reference, but by now you are all experts on vapor intrusion. It's just simply the migration of vapors in the subsurface into a building. So these are here for your reference, but I'm blazing through it because while it's been a year since we were here, I think you are all really familiar on this topic. In the past few present meetings, I've also introduced just how dynamic vapor behavior is, and that's why we are continually monitoring soil vapor, continually monitoring indoor air. Why one round of indoor air sampling just isn't going to be sufficient. We do need at least two just because of that dynamic behavior. But again, these are in here for your reference later. Environmental screening levels. Last year, we talked about adding that 2019 environmental screening level for the site contaminants. We've been using those 2016 screening levels, and last year we talked about adding that just so we can evaluate the site further. We've utilized the 2019 ESLs on all of our other projects. We're doing the same here. The big difference in that change was the attenuation factor, which is just that reduction factor from soil gas to indoor air. That number, that attenuation factor got bigger, meaning less attenuation. So from that's why this number changed. We're just reconsidering, but we have a lot of site data. So all that site data, we're using that too, and there's even site-specific attenuation factors that we're using. And we're using it in those risk evaluations. So we've presented in each of your communities about the results from the risk assessments. It's those results that determined the path forward, and data has been collected since the original ones were submitted, and they were submitted back in 2020, 2021. So from that, as new data comes in, addendums are prepared, and this just makes sure the path forward is protective of human health and the environment. And so I've shown this figure. This just simply shows the different risk ranges. What we look at when all that data is calculated and modeled, we look at current risk, that being the indoor air. We look at future risk. That's that soil gas data that's modeled. And then there's potential response actions. And we take into consideration a number of factors to help decide what we're gonna do. Anywhere from we're not gonna do anything to remediation, and everything in between is determined on a number of site-specific factors. I'm not going too fast. Are we liking this speed? Excellent, okay. All right, so last year I talked about that semi-annual monitoring report and how we were gonna add that 2019 screening level as a new contour line. So what that meant was it was gonna look like the soil vapor plume got bigger. It did not. We've got a great animation a little bit later that shows how the soil vapor plume has changed. but it gave us another way to look at the data. So that was added beginning for the monitoring report for the second semi-annual 2024 monitoring report. So 2 reports have come out with that new line on it. These figures over here have those new added contour lines. It's just another way to display the data. So one of the ways this is going to impact you, there are some homes we're going to bring in for 2 rounds of indoor air sampling that have previously been outside. That report is with me right now. I'm in the process of reviewing it. It does identify a handful of homes, not a lot, but that report also talks about taking some homes out of the indoor air monitoring program because they've already been evaluated, the plume is reduced, there's no vapor intrusion identified, we don't need to keep looking at indoor air. So that's been another thing that's proposed in that. So that'll be a new change that'll be coming, but it's all supported with data, sufficient data set. So now we can get into addressing contamination. So we've talked in the past, we have both mitigation, which is that engineered exposure control that decreases or prevents that contamination from getting into a building. That would be your subslab depressurization systems. And then we have remediation, and we have both passive remediation and active. And we're going to get into the details of this in the coming slides. So mitigation. Those in Bay Ridge Park are familiar with this. That's where 14 homes have had mitigation. This is what that system looks like when it's not behind its enclosure. We do know that it's of size. And so an enclosure has been placed around. It helps to dampen the noise, and it just obscures it from the view. So nothing has changed with this. It's monitored regularly to make sure it's effective. It is far superior than indoor air purifiers, and we have seen good results from this. So nothing new has changed from the last one. But here's where I'm gonna start getting into the weeds a little bit. So we've seen these figures about monitored natural attenuation and where we're doing that for soil gas. So we've got the One Ford Road community. To the south of One Ford Road would be Sea Island and Belcourt Hill. And to the north is that southern portion of the Newport North Apartments and Corsica Villas. And the monitored natural attenuation, that just relies on the naturally occurring reduction of contaminants. So this is where we don't need active remediation like soil vapor extraction. We're doing this also for groundwater. So for groundwater, again, this is where we don't need active remediation, and we're already seeing concentrations decreasing. It makes sense. So it would be the One Ford Road community, Bay Ridge Park, Belcourt Terrace, and that southern portion of the Newport North apartment homes. Now here's where I'm going to slow things down. So I will take a breath because I raced through these first few slides, but when we're talking about monitored natural attenuation, and we have said, you know, this is about that naturally reducing concentrations. It is the preferred and what we are approving approach for those areas of lower concentrations for soil vapor and groundwater. But whenever we have monitored natural attenuation, we want to make sure concentrations are actually reducing. So in a lot of communities, some extra monitoring points have been added, and they are sampled at least 2 times a year. So this figure here on the left, I'm circling it right now. This is for soil vapor. On the left here, this is concentrations. It's really small. You don't have to worry about the numbers. If you dig into the report, you'll see this for every soil vapor probe. But what I want to point out is this top line. This is concentrations from the 15 foot below ground surface samples. And these lower concentrations down here, this is from the 5 foot sample. I'm going to get a little more into the weeds before I talk about how this is going down. This scale, yeah.
This is like an eye test.
It is,
Tell
I know.
us what the scale
Yes. So on the bottom, this is just dates. So this starts in May of 2018, and it's just every time samples have been collected. On the left right here, this starts at 150, and each increment is 150 roughly translated parts per billion. And it goes up in a linear fashion. Now I'm gonna take it one more level. We have two different types of scales. We have a linear scale for this figure, we have a logarithmic scale. Both scales are good, but for the soil vapor results, this linear scale is appropriate because we have a smaller data set, it's shorter term, and we don't have this really dramatic change. Even though concentrations are decreasing, it's not dramatic. We'll talk more on the dramatic changes that we're gonna see in the groundwater and why presenting data in different scales makes sense, and one of the things that we do look at. But back for the soil vapor. This soil gas probe is not located near the soil vapor extraction wells, but what we have seen over time is this top concentration's right about 1,350 at 15 feet below ground surface. And we see that line go up and down a little bit, very common. The concentrations will go down, increase a little, go down, but overall, it's a reducing trend. Down to here, it's at about 450. So we've seen this overall decreasing trend. So this, just like majority of the soil gas probes show this kind of trend, we are looking at that and taking that into consideration. There is both the 5-foot probe and the 15-foot probe for TCE on this figure. One of the things that I'm looking at is that 15-foot going down because, say, the 5-foot is going up? That would be concerning for me. That would make me want to look at homes more for vapor intrusion. But when both concentrations are reducing, this is a good thing. So we look at every one of these probes that has a trend graph every 6 months. That's probably one of the #1 things I go and look at. When somebody calls me and has a question about their home, vapor intrusion, I want to know what the soil vapor probes are doing near your home. And this gives me that confidence to know the plume is shrinking and it is getting smaller. When we shift over to groundwater, I was talking about scales, but here, this is in logarithmic. So the scale interval increases by a factor of 10. So at the bottom, right here, this concentration is 0.1. Then it goes to 1, it goes to 10, it goes to 100, it goes to 1,000. The bottom is still dates, but on this one, this well has been in place for a long time, since 1995. And back in 1995, the concentration was right around 1,000 micrograms per liter, it's roughly parts per million. And that concentration by 2012 went from 1,000, 2012 it was at about 100. So if we had a linear scale, that concentration would start to flatline as it approached this area, because from 2012 we see this great steady decrease. But as it's getting closer to going from 100 to 10, that's going to be a smaller increment. But this is what we see on almost every contaminated groundwater site, is that steady decrease. But I had somebody compare it to me of, you know, when you go on a diet and you start losing weight, you lose a lot of weight first, but it's that last like pound or two that's really hard. You're having this little small decrease, but it's not as noticeable. Kind of similar with groundwater contamination and soil vapor contamination. As it's reducing and getting near that end mark, the decrease is less, but it's still decreasing. So it's really important to look at it this way. Now there's a lot more information on this slide. One of the important things that I will look at when I look at concentration trends, so this green line is for TCE. It's one of the site's primary contaminants. It's what is really driving the soil vapor plume. I look at this blue line up here. This is groundwater elevation, because groundwater that is in this area about 50 feet below ground surface will fluctuate. And we have some sites, not this one, but I have sites where you will see groundwater elevation decrease, and so does the contamination. And then you have some sites where the elevation decreases and the contamination starts increasing, and vice versa. So this helps us to identify, is there still contamination in soil? Is that playing a role in it? Here it's been pretty steady, so that decrease is naturally occurring, and we don't have anything residual back at the site, the former facility, feeding this contamination. So again, we're seeing that attenuation occurring. There are other colors. This represents other contaminants, and it's hard to see, but most of these have open symbols. That means it's non-detect. The lab did not detect that chemical, but what you'll see is it decreases over time. Well, over the decades, the analytical methods have gotten better. The lab equipment has gotten better and can report to a lower limit. And that limit, while the reporting limit gets lower, they're still not finding those chemicals. And I will take it one step further in that TCE, again, this primary contaminant for the site, it's a chlorinated VOC, and what that means is as it reduces, in some cases, a chlorine molecule will pop off and it turns into another chemical. This is important for me because we want to make sure that's not happening, or that if it does, that that's being addressed. So we look at these degradation products, and so there's this whole slew of data that we are looking for and asking questions about as we look at that naturally reducing concentrations. So before I move on, is there anything else we want to elaborate on monitored natural attenuation? This was a lot of kind of heavy information, but the overall takeaway is that for just these two examples, but this is consistent. I think there's 400 plus soil gas sampling locations and 50 some odd groundwater monitoring locations, and this is generally the trend we're seeing. Where we don't see that trend, this is going to be where we're going to be requesting active remediation to occur. If we see those concentrations just staying the same or increasing, that means something more needs to happen. The natural, that natural reduction isn't going to happen and isn't going to take care of it. So
this is an example just from one of the wells or the
yes.
site.
Yeah. So the question was that this is just an example from one. Yep. All right.
This is the old one for TCE, right?
So this one, yeah.
How about the PCE?
So we have that as well. We have not seen that at concentrations more elevated than TCE. So my focus has been on TCE, but both are looked at. For this same graph here for soil vapor, right in the report, right below it is PCE, and they do the exact same trend graphs for that as well.
In other words, that the PCE is more concentrated on the water table, or?
No, you know what? We're not even really seeing much PCE. It was used some in the former facility, but the primary solvent really was TCE. And so that's where what we see the majority of.
Because PCE goes to the soil and TCE goes to the water.
Well, no, TCE and PCE will both adhere to soil, both go to groundwater, both volatilize pretty similarly. The chemical structure is and vapor pressures are all relatively similar, so they behave pretty similar in the subsurface. Mm-hmm. Am I good? All right. So now we're going to talk about soil vapor extraction. This is that active remediation. We have that occurring in both Bay Ridge Park and Belcourt Terrace. It's highlighted here on the figure. I showed this during the last couple of meetings. These lines is just simply the extraction piping that's in Bay Ridge Park and then Belcourt Terrace. This is what connects all of the extraction wells to the remediation systems. Now, for those that live in these two communities, this is what you see going up. All of the equipment is housed within. I showed in the last meeting what the innards of these remediation systems look like. But for the most part, this is what you're gonna see. They come by once a week, once every 2 weeks, a little less as things are progressing, but we're getting closer. So these systems started back at the end of July last year. I'm gonna focus first on Bay Ridge Park. So what you see, this number again, really hard to see, apologies for that. Linear scale, so we start at 0, we go up at 5, 10, 15, 20. What you'll notice is that line is at 16. So we see this with all remediation systems, is when you turn it on, you get this high uptick where they get the majority of the mass. And then things will bottom out, if you will. And this is what we were expecting to happen based on the soil vapor concentrations we were seeing, knowing what groundwater concentrations are in the vicinity. We really were expecting this to happen kind of quick. There's not a lot of mass. This graph shows it. So one of the things that started to happen, and again, this is time, so this is cumulative mass removed in pounds over time. And so the dates are down here. In April of this year, WSP started pulsing the system, which means, and they're doing what's called system optimization. So we want to get as much mass removed as possible before these systems are turned off for good and done. So what they started off with was turn it off for a week, turn it on for a week. They weren't really pulling much extra mass out when they did that. So they started turning it off for 2 weeks and then turn it on for 2 weeks. What they have seen as far as recent mass removal rates, this number is really low, 0.005 pounds per day. Pretty much it's not removing anything. And from before they started pulsing the system to 2 months after they started pulsing the system, that number didn't really change much. So what that says, and what all the great engineers over there look at and consider, is that this system can go off for longer. So now, in the very near future, we're gonna see these longer pulse schedules. So they're gonna turn it off for, say, 2 months, 3 months, and then turn it on for a week. Part of this is gonna also work as a rebound evaluation. And what that means is we're looking as the system goes off. We wanna see how much that soil vapor concentrations increase. This lets us know how successful and effective the soil vapor extraction system was. So we're at 16 pounds. That'll be a newer change coming up. For Bay Ridge Park, the system has to be completely gone no later than August of next year. And so we're gonna be starting this. It has been, this flatlining here is a great thing. This is what we were expecting. This is what supports that there isn't some secret source below ground, because we always kind of say when you're dealing with the subsurface, you don't know if there's something else there until you either get the data that says there's more there than there is, and we have a lot of data points, so we weren't expecting it, or if the mass being removed was a lot higher than anticipated, and we're not seeing that. So everything that was planned and designed is behaving as we expected. So this is good news. All right, Belcourt Terrace. While it looks like the number is going up more, I'm gonna point you to the scale. This increment is in ones. So up here, we're at 5 and 6. So we have just barely passed the 6 pound mark for Belcourt Terrace. So it is having the same optimization, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. They're gonna be doing a longer pulse system. But whereas at Bay Ridge Park, they've removed to date in this past year, right around 16 pounds. Belcourt Terrace, the system has removed about 6 pounds. There's not as much mass. We were also expecting this. So, and the mass removal rate is also low, like it is over at Bay Ridge Park. So this, again, supports the pulsing, and it's gonna support that longer duration of having that system off. Yeah. So it's because the scale is smaller. Yeah, so the question was, why is it so much higher,
more drastic increases. And again, that's the scale, because it's a closer zoomed in look, whereas the other one, the increments were 5-pound increments, and this is 1-pound increments. Yeah. All right. So that's what I have on the soil vapor extraction system. Any other questions on that before we kind of start talking on the soil vapor plume? I had asked WSP to do another way to display concentration. So this is for TCE, and I'm honing in on TCE. We're looking back at 2019 data. I'm gonna spend just a minute here. Okay, so the purple is basically non-detect, meaning the lab wasn't reporting it, or it is below, I know, come on up, Perry, or it's below that 2019 screening level, the really health protective conservative screening level of 16. The lighter green, that goes between the 2016 screening level and the 240. And then it just goes up in different increments. So what I want you to kind of focus in on is this large red area here. This would be between Bay Ridge Park and Belcourt Terrace, where the soil vapor extraction systems have gone, were installed and are operating. I do want to point out to the north here, you're going to see this plume, what looks like grows. It did not grow. We just got data points. You will also see it shift down here within 1 Ford Road. It didn't necessarily increase, it's just a new location got placed in the center. So it just enhanced the data, and it improved the conceptual site model for what we have. So I'm gonna zoom in a little bit on Bay Ridge Park, which is this part, and then Belcourt Terrace. And the remediation systems for the soil vapor extraction was pretty much targeting this orange and red area. Or is it kind of pink? Oh, that's purple, and is this blue? I take this as red. I may be. It may be, you know, I'm gonna blame the screen. No. Okay. The blob in the middle, that's purple to you all?
Higher concentration.
That's the higher concentration area. This color out here and this one are your lower concentrations. And I'm gonna play an animation over time from 2019 to 2025. You're gonna see how the plume shifts and will reduce in areas. You'll notice a color shift between the blue and the green, this lighter green. Part of it is going to be because the lab reporting limit changed for a certain point, so it'll look like the plume expanded, but it didn't. So I'm going to caveat that part. You'll notice this change kind of in the middle, but for the most part, there's just some good info. I'm going to play it twice. I'll let you guys hone in on it, and then maybe I'll talk to it when I play it the second time. Let's see if it starts. There you go. So it stops in 2025 with the May data, and I'm going to talk on it a little bit more, but you'll notice there's blue where there was once purple. I'm going to play it a little more, one more time. So you'll see up here we get a few more data points to the north, and that's why that shifts. We get a new data point in the center here. That's why there's some more information here. But you see how this starts to go away. So let's zoom in on the current data, looking again just TCE and what we were expecting, and these concentrations are reducing. What was once that orange and purple and even yellow in Bay Ridge Park and Belcourt Terrace is now pretty much non-detects, and this green has reduced further. It's just we're using the first semi-annual data from May, and we're seeing continued reduced concentration. So it's doing what we wanted it to do. This is good information. And now I'll draw your attention to the north, in that Newport North apartment homes. We see some orange up here. We see a little bit of orange down here. We're not seeing vapor intrusion in these two areas like we were seeing here where we did the soil vapor extraction. And this is where it's that important part of the kind of to be determined groundwater remediation. Up here, we have a remedial alternative that was just recently approved. There's gonna be active remediation up here in the north. We talked about it in the last meeting. In situ groundwater remediation, it's injecting amendments that helps to reduce concentrations. In the south, there's a little bit more information we need, but addressing the groundwater will in turn address the soil vapor. So it's to kind of take care of two items so that way in the future, we don't have that vapor intrusion risk. So as I mentioned, in the north, we have this refined characterization that is going to be proposed so that they can properly design the remedial alternative. They need a couple more data points so they know exactly where to inject amendments, how much, what spacing, stuff like that. To the south, they've recently added some new monitoring wells. They're getting ready. We'll be able to, with a little bit more sampling data, get a feasibility study submitted for that one and identify remedial alternatives. I've talked on that one. I see, Perry, you got a question? I know.
I wish you had numbered the slide. Oh, you did number this. Could you go back a slide?
Yes. Some of the slides are numbered, some aren't. I don't know why.
Yellow circle at the top.
This one?
Is that a Ford site or is that migration?
So the question is that a Ford site or is it migration? So this is where groundwater left the former facility, and I'm gonna back it up even one more slide. Groundwater leaves the former facility, and here it goes to the north, and it follows, there's an old buried arroyo, and this is the path that the groundwater plume leaves. And we've seen it, we've got monitoring wells there, and the soil vapor plume mimics that. Same with to the south. Groundwater in the south leaves actually in two directions. It goes this way right through the golf course. We don't see any soil vapor over there, but then it also exits through Belcourt Hill and then kind of meets back up, I think, into the golf course area. And that's why we see this soil vapor plume over here. And so for that, this is why we like that soil vapor. It kind of tells us what's going on because soil vapor is going to come from either soil contamination or dissolved contamination in groundwater.
I want to clarify.
Yeah.
The north site up there,
Mm-hmm.
that is not the result of the Ford
Correct.
location. That's the result of migration. So why isn't there migration from where we are
Mm-hmm.
all the way out to there? Why did it disappear and then suddenly appear?
So back in the 90s, when they did a lot of remediation, they addressed groundwater in here in that soil. And so we have seen that that well that I showed you that had that decreasing trend was located up here on Bison. And the historical groundwater assessment that was done addressed the contamination up here, but some of it did leave the site. And so that's why we see it migrating this way. And then when groundwater leaves the site, and especially contamination, it follows its own kind of path of least resistance, general groundwater flow. And that's why, you know, as we look at historical topos, we see these buried arroyos, and we do see that groundwater follows that. So it's just kind of path of least resistance, if you will. But yeah, no Ford facility operations happened up here. It was outside of their leased area, and any of the areas that they historically operated at, we have looked at with soil vapor probes and stuff. And then you get it.
Shopping center that is just circling over
Mm-hmm.
and inside that the black preliminary the map. Why that is not under your monitor scope work? Why is not in there?
There has been a number of soil vapor. So the question is, why is the shopping center not under our review? So there's been soil vapor probes that have gone in around it, and up to the back. And I know we have some monitoring points in there, right? Groundwater wells, soil vapor probes
On the perimeter, correct.
around the perimeter.
We
And
don't
so-
have anything within the shopping center itself.
Okay, and so that's, we've had enough. Well, I know there's a dry cleaning site there, but it is not an open case with the water board. And when we have looked at soil vapor probes that go right up against that property, we're not seeing any contamination coming off of that property down into Newport North that I've noticed, because that was a question. Anytime we see a dry cleaner site or we see.
Not necessarily, but if that's the entire perimeter, the black line,
Mhm.
if that the property falls in that limit, why you guys are not monitoring and somebody else monitoring that?
Because there isn't. Well, so here we're not seeing a release that's happened over here, and the focus has been on the release that happened from Ford, and it has left, and there's been a sufficient data set, both from groundwater wells historically and current, and soil vapor probes to support the monitoring program. And we've looked at a lot of these areas over the course of the last 8 years for that reason, to make sure there isn't some secondary source, something else that's contributing. So if it's an open case, I just haven't looked. It could be with the local oversight program, but I haven't seen it. So we're just following the data that's been collected so far.
At the top of the chart is, I assume, the back bay,
Yeah.
and if you follow it to the right, there is a stream,
The stream right here.
yeah, that goes right there. How do we know that this contaminant didn't go into that area?
So the question is, how do we know the contaminants didn't go into that area? So that conceptual site model that I talked about in 2017, that was one of the data gaps that identified, was that leading edge of the groundwater plume is what's the extent, how far does it reach, and does it get into the surface water? We asked that exact same question down here in Bonita Creek. No, back, Big Canyon. This creek down here. So we've got Bonita Creek up to the north and Big Canyon down here. And both creeks, we were asking that question, is the leading edge of the groundwater plume getting into the surface water, and is that a risk to aquatic habitat? So part of that assessment back in 2018 answered that very question. And we were looking, Ford and WSP had gone in, they collected what's called pore water samples. So that's the sample just below the surface or the bottom of the stream, to see if there's any connection between that groundwater getting into the stream or not. We wanted to know that, and then what are the concentration differences. And there was one outlet right by a storm drain where they got a very small, right about the MCL, which is the drinking water standard, one little detection there, and then as they went down, there was nothing. So, and then additionally, groundwater samples and wells are collected on the other side of that stream to see if groundwater or soil vapor extends under and past, or does it skirt along this side of the creek. And from all the wells, it does stay on this side, but we're not seeing a negative impact on the surface water. Yeah, yeah. And they did several rounds of sampling for that reason. All right, so we covered this, we covered that. Remediation progress, so where are we at? So I'm gonna jump to the end part with Bay Ridge Park and Belcourt Terrace. We're getting ready and really close to that post-remediation monitoring. We're getting there. Newport North, we're in the remedial design part for designing that in situ groundwater remediation. And then for groundwater for Sea Island and Belcourt Hill, and I specify groundwater, That's where we're still just collecting a little bit more data so that remedial alternatives can be developed. But the soil gas for those communities is that monitored natural attenuation. All right, you guys have seen this all before on the what's next. That's not changing. We're still doing ongoing monitoring. We're looking at soil gas, we're looking at groundwater. There's even long-term indoor air monitoring. But there's gonna be that change to the indoor air monitoring program. As the plume reduces, we will start removing homes and properties from the air monitoring program. Risk assessments, as new data becomes available, we wanna make sure the path forward is still health protective and protective of the environment. So those routinely get evaluated. When an addendum gets submitted, I send it to Amanda at OEHA, Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, because she's a toxicologist. This is her area of expertise, so she's able to review it and provide comments, which is great. And then, again, it helps us to determine that our path forward remains appropriate. A few years ago, we got more data for the northern portion of Newport North. That data was different than what we were seeing in that southern portion. So it changed what we were gonna do. That's why we talk about Newport North in two parts, in the southern portion and the northern portion. There's enough change that what works for the south isn't gonna necessarily work for that northern area. So again, this is how we make sure we're continuing this adaptive approach on the project. All right, and then remediation. As the remedy gets implemented, it's gonna be monitored. Once the remedy is done, there is post-remediation monitoring to make sure it's effective. The summary has not changed. We saw this last time, as well as this slide. So I'm skimming right through, but it is here for your reference just to recap what has happened since we started the vapor intrusion assessment. We're continuing with the community outreach. We have added plain language summaries to the quarterly remediation progress reports. There's a plain language summary at the beginning of the semi-annual monitoring reports. We do send out the fact sheets twice a year, and then we have held those community-specific meetings and communications such as emails. Those are ongoing and as needed. If there isn't a need for it, we're not going to do it. But if there's new change, new information, we want to make sure we're communicating that with you. And we'll continue with the annual community updates like this. And I will always have those first 6 slides, and I'll blaze through them and then get to the information, hopefully show some more data next time. This is where you can get all the different information. We have GeoTracker, you can do the Gov Delivery, which is the state's email notification list. Really, we use it to send out when the next public meeting is. The Water Board does have a web page. Ford has their site-specific web page as well as an 800 number. It is 833. So while we say 800 number, it's not 800. Toll-free though. And then there is the local information repository here at the library. So now we can go into questions.
So does anybody have cards or questions? Anybody fill out a card? No? You want to talk into the microphone? All right, 1 moment.
Could you go back 1 slide?
Yes, I can.
One more. There you go. The middle one, that's the garage building in that I drive by every day in Hillsdale.
Right.
I thought you guys were going to put large trees in front of it to block it from view. What you have there is little itty bitty vines and not trees. What is there a plan to block that with full-grown trees as was originally discussed?
Okay, so I'm just going to repeat this. Is there a plan to block or to put some type of mature landscaping in front of the middle building that has a treatment system, which was originally discussed?
Sure, I can answer that. So the architectural or agricultural design that you see there was approved by the HOA board, and that is what is going to be final. So there's no further plans for any additional trees in that area.
How long is it going to be there, Mike?
So right now, there is no timeline. I did want to point out one point of clarification with respect to parcel 10's, actually Bay Ridge Parks SVE system. That system needs to be removed by August 28th, 2026. That's just the building and the foundation that needs to be removed. That doesn't include the subterranean piping and all of that. But for Belcourt Terrace, we do not have a timeline. It is our goal to have that system turned off and decommissioned within 2 years of the start of operation. That's always been our goal. What that looks as far as the removal of that building is still to be determined.
And Mike, if you can just clarify, you said that the system has to be removed. Who's making you remove it? It's in accordance.
With respect to Bay Ridge Park, we have a limited term permit for that building that expires August 28th of 2026. So the city of Newport Beach is requiring us to remove that building.
So they let you only operate it for a short time.
What happens if extraction isn't complete?
We have a contingency in place for that, and that'll be discussed in the decommissioning report that we're going to be submitting to the water board. So that's the reason we leave all the subterranean pipes for some time to account for long-term rebound, because we're working under what we consider a condensed schedule, 2 years. For remediation, sometimes that can be considered condensed. And so we do have contingency measures that are in place to address if there's any additional rebound that comes up.
Just on follow-up, the subterranean pipes, I assume those would just stay forever so you don't have to dig up the streets again.
Mike, repeat the question, okay?
Sure, I will. The question is, with respect to the subterranean pipes, it was community members understanding that they may stay there indefinitely so that we don't have to dig up the road. And that will be a discussion that we will have with the HOA. It is Ford's responsibility to remove everything to pre-existing conditions at the discretion of the board. So we will work with them. I mean, I agree. Ideally, we would just fill those pipes, leave them there, remove the access points, which are the vaults, and then repave those areas. But again, rather than come into the community and dig everything up like we did when we installed it, yeah, we will be exploring those options to have as minimal amount of impact to the community as possible. Yep.
Okay, other questions?
I'll add, we had some written in questions, so I'll go ahead and read those.
I have an online question first,
Okay.
if you don't mind.
yeah.
So it's, what map was it, John? It's very early on in this, so one moment, please. Okay,
Is it
going backwards.
all the way to the beginning?
Okay, so on this map, I'm wondering about the red boundary line and how that was determined. If I live outside of that boundary, can I be eligible for sampling?
All right, so I'll touch on that one first. That boundary line originally started because of the groundwater plumes that go to the north and to the south. That red boundary line does not depict where indoor air investigation goes. And there are, at least in the Big Canyon area, on Ford Road, there's a couple other sampling points, but everything that we have that's in those, the edges of it already is non-detect, whether it's groundwater or soil vapor. And what I mean by non-detect is that the analytical method, that reporting limit, cannot get any lower. And so for simplicity's sakes, we'll say the reporting limit is 1, and they analyzed for contaminant X and they didn't get a detection. So it'll say non-detect or less than 1. And we don't need to go out further because the reporting limit, one of the things that as the regulator we ask for is the reporting limit needs to match our screening levels. So for groundwater, we want it less than the maximum contaminant levels, which is the drinking water levels. For soil vapor, we want it less than the residential screening levels to make sure, because you don't want to delineate a plume to 1,000 if the screening level is 10. Right? That's not health protective. And so those are the things we're looking at and how we scrutinize the data from the lab reports that come in, the data that's where samples are placed,
I compare it to, when this investigation first started, if you go down onto one of the floors in our office, you will find an old lamp table, which you used to use when doing, just engineering drawings and stuff. So I turned on that lamp table and put on the old historical aerials from the 40s, 50s, 60s, and laid over the existing figures so I could look at where the historical buildings were. I wanted to see, before things were developed, how the topography looked, just to get an idea of how the contamination may have left the site below ground. Because we're dealing with the subsurface, we have to ask these kind of questions, and you have to play a little bit of detective. And so it's just taking all of these resources, and over the years, and looking at a lot of sites over my career, that's why I'm looking and asking those kind of questions of, what's the historical topography before things were developed? Where were buildings at? Was there some unique outhouse that wasn't on an original plan? And if we dig through city records, we're gonna find that it was actually part of the former facility. Things like that. So we're always asking these questions to make sure the site is adequately characterized, so the conclusions that are made are health protective and protective of the environment.
So I want to make sure, maybe I missed it, that if you're outside of the red boundary zone, you're not eligible.
No, you're
for
not
testing
eligible.
because it's not needed, because you're fairly confident
Yeah.
that property has no impacts from the chemicals you're looking for.
Correct. We have enough data points that show that there is no detections outside of it. Otherwise, that would have moved and become bigger.
Is there a follow-up, John, there? Okay, what is it?
Is it possible for the vapor plume to migrate out, therefore changing the levels that might have previously been deemed too low or safe?
Okay, so is it possible for the vapors to have migrated out of the study zone area, thereby necessitating further study on the outside boundaries? I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
Probably not well.
So it wouldn't have detached like that. Where now are seeing the detached plume in, say, Bay Ridge Park and Belcourt Terrace, we've done active remediation. So part of what has happened within the former facility is we have stepped out. And Bay Ridge Park and Belcourt Terrace are the perfect examples of how remediation was done in the former facility and how it did not reach outside of that facility, and it did not affect those concentrations. So the surrounding communities of the former facility, we have had soil vapor probes, and if contamination had left, it wouldn't have been addressed by previous remediation, and it would still be there. There isn't a driving force to push it away. If it's just soil vapor. Groundwater, we would still see that residual impact, and we're not seeing it. And that's why we like soil vapor. From a regulatory perspective, soil vapor is my favorite media. I call it the tattletale media. If there's something there from a volatile organic compound, you will see it in soil vapor. And it helps me to say, or it directs into let's ask more questions. Do we need to collect soil? Do we need to collect more groundwater? And the number of times I have asked Ford and WSP to, hey, I need you to collect some groundwater over here. We got to see if this is because there's some area of groundwater that hasn't been evaluated yet that we're not aware of, or is it just that residual, these lower concentrations in groundwater off-gassing. So we have continually throughout since 2017, when it comes to soil vapor, ask the questions to make sure that we're not missing anything, that there isn't some detached rogue, if you will, plume. We have a substantial data set to support that.
Okay, Mike, I think you wanted to add something.
I just wanted to add to that, and Jessica alluded to this previously, is that we have over 400 soil gas probe locations throughout the site, and we continuously monitor those. Last year it was monitored 3 times within a year, and next year it'll be twice. And so we assess those conditions, and if conditions change over time and it warrants the need for a home to be pulled into the indoor air program because they've exceeded screening levels, we do that. We're not walking away from the monitoring of those probes. It'll be part of the long-term monitoring program. And therefore, again, if conditions change over time, we will know and we'll be able to work with the community accordingly. But for right now, we feel very confident that we have delineated the lateral extent of the soil gas plume, and that's why we have the area of investigation outlined in that red.
Okay,
And-
so for the person that asked that, if you're outside the red area, you're monitoring, and right now there's not an issue, but you're monitoring at a frequency. If there was, you would be able to catch it and pull them into the investigation area.
Correct.
And that's where I'd, mentioned as I was kind of talking on those next steps and how we've got those risk assessments, I mentioned an adaptive approach. If the data says go right when you've been going left, we're going to go right. We're going to course correct. And I've said that consistently since probably 2018 when we were first doing these public meetings. As data comes in, we are constantly course correcting to make sure we're not getting tunnel vision. We don't want that because that doesn't do anyone any good. It doesn't get the site cleaned up any quicker. It doesn't protect anyone any faster. It doesn't resolve the problem. So as data comes in, we make modifications as appropriate. So.
Okay. I think Jessica got some questions
Yeah.
in an email that she was just going to read to everybody and answer just in a preponderance of transparency. So why don't you go, unless nobody else has questions right now.
All right, so while you are all thinking of some more questions, I'll read these couple. First one was, please post community outreach meetings at the very top of that Ford site-specific website. I guess many residents who go to the website are unaware that there's a meeting. So Craig Communications did confirm that going forward, they'll add the little banner on top to just announce when the next public meeting is.
And good idea.
Yeah, good idea for that one. It also said, please email people that have opted in to receive emails that there is a meeting. Those do happen. I get CC'd, I get blind CC'd on them. Or is it a CC? I get them. So it's two groups. It's a really large list. So I get notified when you all are getting notified. If you didn't get it, definitely check your junk folder. It may have gone there. If it's not in there, reach out to me, let me know. I will send your email on to Craig Communications and we'll get it added. They are, I will say, when it comes time for the public meetings, they are sent 2 months before the meeting, 1 month before the meeting, the week before the meeting, and the day before the meeting. And I see all the heads nodding in here because everyone, I think, is signed up. So I see that too. And that's how I remember to send out my reminder email from GovDelivery. All right. And then the last question was to please post in the current fact sheet and at the top of the website what many residents have requested are the current highest TCE, PCE, VOC readings, and and in short, in very simple language and numerics, how many times and the percentage above the California legal maximum amount outside and inside homes, two numbers that are still astronomically high but hidden deep within the website. So I will add that in all the data collected, there's a lot of information. We have so many soil vapor probes. There is so many homes that have been sampled. 400 homes have been sampled at least once. But with each home, it's really nuanced. So the data for those that have their homes sampled, it does go to them. We don't want to post indoor air results because the highest results have been from ambient air samples or from a material bag sample because we had gone in on the initial screening and there was a higher elevated, or it was above the indoor air screening level number, and it didn't quite match the subsurface number. So the soil gas number, the attenuation factor was just different. It raised questions, so it made us need some more information so we make the right decision.
So you go back, this is where WSP will say they want to do a chemical inventory or a material sampling, and they will take certain things that are suspected to be off-gassing these VOCs. Common ones that we have seen is candles, we have seen hobby glue, air fresheners and such, and we have seen high numbers. So if we said the highest air concentration, well, it was associated with hobby glue. That's why indoor air concentrations were so elevated. So that's not representative, and that takes looking at it. So that's something we're not doing. All of the data is presented, and we do communicate with each homeowner those values, what we're seeing, why we need more testing, why we are confident in the conclusions that come. There are some times where WSP will say, here's all the lines of evidence. We think it's an indoor air source. I will look at their reasoning and say, I have some more questions. And I will ask those more questions. And there are other times they will send those lines of evidence, and I will say, yeah, I agree with what you have provided, and I'm looking at the trends and everything else, and I'm looking at a handful of other things to also come to the same conclusion. So we don't do the numbers on the page because it changes. What you can do, GeoTracker does have the ability, it's the state database, all of the analytical data has to be uploaded in an electronic deliverable format, EDF. And you can actually extract data that way. You can look at maximums and stuff, and you can go down a rabbit hole a little bit of that data, but it is all presented and discussed. That plain language survey, when I looked at it, I didn't see necessarily any numbers, numerical numbers, but it does explain what we're seeing in general trends. And these numbers are ever evolving. So that's why it doesn't make sense from a routine monitoring point to have these numbers, because it's very nuanced and requires those explanations, which is really detailed in the report. So that's why we always say, and we've been asked this question throughout, and we always point it back to the report. Now, if you have a specific area and you're concerned with what's below the ground or the concentrations in your home, this is where we'll do the one-on-ones. I've had a number of folks call me up, and we walk through those results. And what we're seeing, what I see, my perspective from my professional experience and my years in this field, and looking at everyone's data as it comes in. So I'm always happy to do that. All right.
Okay, I have a couple of questions online. Any questions from attendees? Okay.
Hey, Tracy, one point quickly. I wanted to go back to the mailing list for these meetings. The site figures that you see show several communities, whether they're HOA or commercial properties that are outside of our investigation area, and they may not be included in the mailing. We send out, I think, about 2,500 invites to these meetings, and those are to the communities that are primarily impacted by our activities. So you might be in a community that's slightly outside, and you might not be getting the mailing. And that's why, because that community is not impacted by our activities or perceived contamination.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. Does the team have any health-related data of residents in the study area, specifically cancer cases? I think that's you, Amanda.
Hi. Yeah.
Amanda, if you would once again introduce yourself and who you represent.
So my name's Amanda Palumbo, and I work for the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment. I'm a toxicologist. So
and maybe explain what a toxicologist does. I think we know, but
I study toxic chemicals and their effects
on human health.
On human health, and also I have expertise in conducting risk assessments, so calculating the health risks, potential health risks from the contaminants. So in regards to the study question, I had contacted the Department of Public Health pretty early on, or well, when we started this, like in 2019. So they collect data on when cancers are diagnosed. The doctors are obligated to report that to the Department of Public Health. They also collect information on birth defects. And they did a comparison of the way that they typically look at the data when there's a concern for a particular community is they compare how many people have cancer in the area of concern. And since this is a pretty large area, they used there was a census tract that kind of fit that outline that we were showing earlier of the
Study area and
of
the study area.
So they compared the number of cancer cases in that area to the number of cancer cases in the greater Orange County area. And they didn't find a statistical difference in the cancer cases. So there wasn't evidence that there were more cancer cases in this area versus outside the area.
Okay, great, okay.
Yeah.
Next question. Oh,
Can I elaborate on that?
Yeah.
Did anybody ever check on the employees of the Ford plant? I know of instances of cancer deaths of people who worked at that location.
So I didn't look at that, and that's sort of outside the scope of what we're doing here. I mean, you could ask Ford to do that still, but we're, like the main concern that I looked into was, does the contamination in the ground in the neighborhood affect the residents that live here, not what happened specifically at the facility?
Not that
Right.
occupational health.
but I also think that going backwards in time, right, it closed quite some time ago, and finding people and stuff makes it very difficult. But short answer, no, that has not been done, Perry.
Anybody asked Ford to do that? Yes, I have.
I was going to say, I know you have, but it's outside of our jurisdiction and scope.
Is Ford represented here tonight?
That would be Mike.
Yep.
I know. And what's the answer?
I'd be happy to take that back to Ford, talk to them about it. Yep.
Okay, all right, I'm going to move us on. Here is the last question we got online. Is there a map indicating the locations of the 400 test probes? I feel like there's probably many, many maps.
I was going to say, there's a figure off on the right. If you go on to GeoTracker, and I'm sure you have it on the Ford website, but on GeoTracker, you can go to the towards the bottom GeoMaps, and there are updated figures, and those will show all the locations. In the semi-annual monitoring report, you will see all those data points. And so we have the figures up here, and we can talk to them here. But yeah, it's a high density.
I would just say, if there's somebody that's online that's new to this, all of this information is online, and you can start it in ViroStore. You can go to Ford's
GeoTracker, not in ViroStore.
I'm sorry, thank you. GeoTracker, SDTS's GeoTracker. You can go to Ford's website, and then if you'd like to just talk with somebody, Jessica is always available, as is Mike. So all of that information is in the fact sheets, but you can also just Google Ford Aeronutronics, and all of this will pop up. I Googled it, and almost all of it comes up right away.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any other questions?
Otherwise, we can answer the one-on-ones. If there's any questions on the figures, and if you want to dive into any of.
Do you want to do that after the meeting or
Yeah.
during the meeting? Right, during the
After.
meeting. So I was
Yeah.
going to say, are there any just questions for the whole group wants to hear? Okay. Anybody online?
No.
Okay. Then similar to last time, we're going to close the meeting, but we will remain after. And we have these maps up here. You're welcome to ask property-specific questions or any questions that you like. And once again, want to thank you on behalf of the Water Board for attending this meeting. We're very grateful that you're here. Thank you.